Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the story.
What is your best crazy ex-boyfriend story? I was in high school and met this guy in German class. We hit it off and started dating. We dated for about 6 months, and he kept pressuring me to have me and I wasn't ready. I was about 15, so I broke it off with him. He proceeds to stalk me at school, following me to classes. He calls my house constantly, shows up at my work. He calls every Sunday around 3 p.m., saying he is going to OD on pills and kill himself. My dad got on the phone and put an end to that. To top off the crazy, he stalks me to a class again and hands me a letter. I go into class and start to read it, and it's this letter about how he is going to kill me and my guy friend because he thinks we are together, and how he is going to blow up the school and stalk me forever. The kicker is that the note had blood all over it. He emo cut his wrists, across, not down the river, and then wrote the note. I turned the note into the office, and he is suspended. Fast forward going on 10 years later, I still get messages that he is in love with me and will never let me go. So now I want to hear your best. I'm sitting on the couch, got out of school early. My husband, at the time, comes stumbling in, drunk. Surprised I was home. He sneaks off to the bedroom. I walked in a bit later, he passed out. That's when I found his phone on the floor. I had suspected he was cheating for quite a while. In his text messages was a discussion, from the other woman. I love you, but what are we going to do about her? His reply, don't worry, I'll take care of that. The next day I confronted him about the messages. He puts me in a choke hold and says if I calm down, he won't let me pass out. I knew then he was trying to kill me. I kicked him in the balls and got the heck out of Dodge. Afterwards I found he killed our pets. It's a heck of a lot to deal with. I had called my ex to say goodnight because I wasn't going to see him that night as it was going to run late and that my phone was running out of battery. When I got home, 4 hours later, in the cab a creepy hand grabbed me through the window and I freaked out. He had been sitting there the whole time. I thought it was weird but was weirded out even more when I changed my phone and saw that he had left 8 messages ranging from "Goodnight baby" to "Why are you doing this to me?" When I asked him about it, he shrugged and said, I thought you were lying to me about the battery, but it's okay, I saw it was dead when you got home. A few more things like this happened, and then we broke up. After we broke up, he had a habit of sitting in the lobby of my building for hours. He also got his friends to look out for me while I was out and report any guy they saw me talking to. Once I was having dinner with a male friend and called me up screaming that we were meant to break up and how dare I move on with another guy before giving him that release. Also, a year later when I had moved into a new place he turned up drunk and started buzzing my apartment and yelling at me through the intercom. The security guard said he fell down the stairs and would not be bothering me anymore. This is outrageously long, but I promise, it delivers. A personal nightmare that lasted months longer than it should have. I apologize for my unliterary brevity, but I haven't slept and it's an exceptionally long story. Backstory: he had a lunatic Jehovah's Witness mother who incessantly talked about the end of the world and her bowel functions. She also informed me that she used to put her kids to sleep with cold medicine. Keep this in mind later on. There are children involved in this story, so it's a tough one. I ran away from home when I was 19 and moved 2,000 miles to California to be with this guy. This was a lesson to me about running away from, instead of toward. The home situation was absolutely unlivable. My stepfather was there in the house, and the ugly old man had been pawing me, and with me, since I was 11. Daily I dealt with this. My mother called me a liar to my face when I told her. It's a long story, but I had good reasons for doing this very foolish thing. I had only known him for 2 months when I moved out there. He lived in a single room in someone else's house. My plans were to get established, which I immediately set about doing, looking for work. I planned afterward to become a writer, and actually did get a couple of poems published in a little coffeehouse rag in San Diego. I felt good at the time, like I was going somewhere. Then I got prego. I was on the pill, we had used a condom, which broke, and I was using spermicidal foam. I did not want this to happen yet, but it did. The first thing he told me was, "Boy, my little guys can swim." The first thing my best friend told me was, "Come home," and like a fool I didn't listen. By the time I realized I was pregnant, I was 3 months and my periods have always been irregular, and it was too late to abort. Not that I wanted that on my conscience anyway. He told me, "If you adopt it out, I'll have my mother adopt it." That horrified me, and an odd kid 2,000 miles from home, I didn't know how to get around that threat. I had to keep the baby, for its own protection, and I knew that right away. During my pregnancy, although everything seemed all right with us, I had a dream about the baby I was carrying. I dreamed then that it was a boy. It was. He was with me in a huge observatory, and he was about 12 in the dream. He turned to me in the dream and said, "You have to get out of here. You have to get away from him." I didn't know where to go, guys. My home? No way. Where could I go? When the baby was born, all hell broke loose. He deeply resented me staying home with the baby, and he ceased to bring home food. He told me, "You have to get a job, my mother can watch him." The baby was breastfed and about 2 weeks old when we had this conversation. His mother had been allowed to watch the baby once. I had come home to be shown a video of her and her half-retarded boyfriend dancing around with my wee son after midnight, while he wailed and cried. Horror, again. No, she could not watch him, and I was 2,000 miles from home, stupid kid. He stopped bringing food home, I assume from resentment. He would eat at Jack in the Box, leaving me to subsist on the $20 a month I got from my dad, God bless him, and he would have sent more, but he had no idea. I couldn't admit to him how terrible things were. I bought cake mix, spinach, and milk. I breastfed my son exclusively. I was so hungry, I literally wept in the grocery store when I saw all the good things I couldn't afford, and I was almost out of money. By the time I came home, months later, I would weigh 98 pounds. The house was full of roaches. I used to lie with the baby on a mattress on the floor, to keep the roaches off of him. The boyfriend railed at me for not sleeping in the bed with him. I want to point out that we didn't have to live this way. He was working 2 jobs, one of which was union. The custody judge would berate me for this later. But none of that money came home. He put it in the bank and ate Jack in the Box. He once went to work and left his infant son in the middle of the living room floor, without waking me up. I got up hours later and the baby was there on the floor with a soaked nappy, and very unhappy. I had to leave. It was even worse than this, you all. I wish I could tell you all of it, but I haven't slept at all here. This feels like an epic to write. I'm leaving out desolate months. The baby's essentials like blankets came out of my monthly $20 from the local swap meet. I had to shake bugs out of them. I've never been rich, but I was not raised this way, and I was hurting. I called home and whispered to my dad that I had to come home now. I was starving, there was no food, and the baby was developing an empty stare that I didn't like. Today he has Asperger's syndrome, and I will always wonder. During this same time, the insane guy had left me and was staying at his mother's. I learned of his abdicating the relationship when he stayed at his mom's and ate Thanksgiving dinner, staying there overnight without us. Some backstories. During the months I'm leaving out, my mom and sister came to visit me, and during this time my sister slept with a friend of his. They were only here a week. I'll leave you to your own conclusions about that. She also told him, unbeknownst to me, that I was planning to leave the guy. Because of this, I was served a court order after the guy scurried to mommy and was forbidden from leaving the state. You see the mess developing. stupid kid. When my dad arrived, there was so little food in the house that he took pictures. Then he took me out to get groceries, and when we arrived home the place had been ransacked. My books, my writing, my word processor, all of the baby's possessions, all my possessions, gone, and as we were staring at the emptied house in a daze, a police officer showed up at the door with a court order to take my son. The guy had lied to a judge and told him we were leaving the state. He knew my dad was coming, and he had been calling and hanging up all afternoon. When they knew we were gone, he and his family swept in and took everything. To the police officer's credit, they were both upset and made a concerted effort to contact the judge to remand the order but couldn't reach him. I had to give my son to the police officer. He was 4 months old and totally breastfed, would not take a bottle. And that the ex took him from me, and that man kept him from me all night. I called and called, from the hotel room where my dad and I stayed during this horrible crisis. I called until 3 a.m. against the court order, and finally he picked up and said, he needs his mom. He brought him back the next day, and by the time he arrived at 2 p.m. my breasts were balls of agony, I was running a fever and could hardly see. I nursed the incredibly hungry child immediately and he emptied both breasts. I swear that I have never wanted to kill a man, and his mother, who masterminded this, so much. I never did get my back. There was a protracted custody battle, he was told to pay support and didn't. They garnished his wages, so he quit the job. I haven't seen a cent of support in 13 years now. He owes over $78,000, and I honestly hope he chokes on it, although I would never let my son hear me say so. My son asks about him now. The guys never came to see us, though I flew out there with the baby when he was about 1 to go see him. The court order mandated that he then come to where I lived to see the baby. He never did. Incidentally, when the boy was 8, he suddenly became very faint, and we had to rush him to the hospital. It turned out he had Crohn's, was bleeding in his intestines, and was in immediate need of a blood transfusion. Jehovah's Witnesses don't allow blood transfusion, and that crazy mother of the ex owned the guy. If I had left that baby in California, he would be dead today. He's happy and mostly healthy now though, incredibly bright. His favorite thing is a Lego robotics class he's taking after school, and I'm unspeakably proud of him. We're okay now, and I try not to think about any of this. Edited for profanity. I hope I got it all. I apologize for what's left. I have to sleep. Thank you for letting me tell you this. I've needed this cry for a long, long time. Started dating a guy right after I turned 18, we'll call him Steve. We ended up dating for 3 years. During that time, he was deployed to Iraq for a year and a half, and after he came back we lived together and ended up moving to a different state together. About 5 months after we had moved, a mutual and very trusted friend told me that Steve had cheated on me multiple times just before we moved together. I confronted Steve about it, and he denied it no matter how much I told him I knew. Anyway, I ended up trying to break up with him. I say trying, because it was a very long drawn-out process. He constantly tried to win me over and say that no one would ever love me again as much as he did. He stalked me at bars and called all of my friends and family members to try to get them to persuade me to get back together with him. All the while he was sending me text messages saying he was going to kill himself without me and he couldn't bear to live anymore. So, one night after a particularly scary message, I went to see him to make sure he was doing okay. He eventually passed out and I called the suicide hotline and told them about his history, that he was a veteran, his suicide messages to me and so on. They told me to call the police, so I did. They ended up taking him to a mental hospital, where he stayed for about 2 weeks. After that, we were over, and he moved back to our hometown. Fast forward to about 3 years later, one of our mutual friends gets married and I have to see him at their wedding. He was still crazy. Asked me if I could save a slow dance for him, kept buying my new boyfriend shots, made the whole weekend as awkward as possible. So about 2 weeks after the wedding, I find out that he had been arrested for possession/manufacture/distribution of child pornography. And he told our mutual friend that he thought it was my fault that he got caught, because I was probably the one that ratted him out to the police. I mean, WTF if I had known that I would have done something about it 3 years earlier. I was kidnapped, held hostage, stalked, forced to move out of my parents' house to hide from this guy, where he proceeded to stalk me to my work to find out where my new house was. Then he lied and swore in his family's lives that he did no such thing, and then he loved me and wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. Oh, and that if I were to have someone else's baby it would be okay, he would raise it as his own. Now I can sense it crazy from miles away. I was having doubts about him and was discussing it over texts with a guy friend of mine. Admittedly, I should have talked to the BF about it instead, but that's not the point. BF went through my phone, then accused me of meeting my friend. He went berserk. Made a huge production out of packing up his stuff and leaving. We'd only been together 2 months. There wasn't that much stuff. After leaving, he stood on my porch for a few moments collecting his thoughts, evidently changed his mind, and begged to be let back in. I refused, and he sobbed and scratched at my door for the next 2 hours like an emo zombie. Days later, he demanded to have my microwave. He'd given it to me as a surprise gift when I was out of town. Originally, it belonged to a friend of his. I left it on my porch for him, to avoid confrontation, and watched him take it and toss it in my dumpster. Against my better judgment, I sent him a WTF type message. I mean, not only was that immature, but it's hugely wasteful. If he were going to take it back, he could at least use it, or give it away or something. In response, he drove back over, fished it out of the trash, and left it on my porch. After I disinfected it, I put it back in my kitchen. Then I got another message, this time demanding the microwave back on behalf of his friend. Again, I left it on the porch. Later that day, I watched him throw it in the dumpster. This time I went to Walmart and just bought a new microwave. When my ex and I broke up, I went over to get my stuff and deleted any incriminating photos he had of me on his computer. In addition to the photos I knew were there, I found hundreds of photos he had taken of me sleeping. I don't know what he was planning to do with them, or what provoked him to take them, but it still creeps me out to this day. After my first ex dumped me even after asking me to move for him, which I stupidly agreed to, but hey, sometimes you got to learn the hard way. It took me a while to get comfortable with the idea of dating again. So, I tried the internet. I got to chat with a guy who lived about an hour away, on a military base. As a girl from a military family, we hit it off and agreed to meet. It was a nice, mellow first date, a small snack in the bookstore cafe, then a drink at a local bar, my first time in a bar. I'd just turned 21. Long story short, we decide to see each other, though we aren't calling it anything just yet, especially since he got shipped to the Philippines for work. About 2 months into his absence, we decided to make it serious. The weird starts with his rules while he's gone. He told me, word for word, you can sleep with other people. I understand 8 months is a long time. But you can't tell me, and you can't cheat on me. Oh, okay. Then he decided that anything from the point we met counted as cheating and demanded to know if I'd been with anyone else. I honestly hadn't, so I said no. He had a tough time accepting it because, in his words, his last girlfriend had cheated on him, so why was I any different? I chalked it up to work stress and let it drop. The next time he got furious was when he told me to go online and pick a piece of jewelry. The website he sent me to have earrings for as low as $80 and as high as $500. When I finally, reluctantly, picked the $80, they were the cutest and the most expensive ones made me both uncomfortable and feel gaudy. He thought I was insulting him and his financial situation. When he got back, it got worse. He bought a TV instead of the vacation he'd promised, to Greece, Italy, and Egypt over the span of a week, was mad that it had a crack in the frame, remember when Circuit City was going out of business, and threw the remote and started screaming. He began chiding me for not wearing makeup more often. He tried to get me to agree to try ecstasy. He was a chain smoker and threatened to break up with me if I ever started smoking. I smoked close behind his back, as I'd started while he was gone. We end up going to Jersey to meet his family, where I mysteriously discover that nobody else there has the accent he claimed belonged to everyone. I also caught a bad cold the first night and spent the next 2 days in bed, which he was also furious with me for. I was sick the entire plane ride to Florida, our second stop before going home, and the first day in Orlando, and he screamed at me for ruining his vacation. I texted a friend, male, friend from work, and he kept trying to peek over my shoulder. Nothing was ever said, other than, in Florida. Having fun with BF. How's the store? How's, insert manager, with heart problems here? But, as I noted on the plane ride to Jersey when I was trying to work on my novel, I hate people reading over my shoulder. After repeated requests that he at least ask before looking, I finally snap and tell him to knock it out. Humor shouting about how he did all this for me, treated me nicely, took me on vacation, and I was trying to cheat on him. We pulled over once to ask for directions. I will wait in the car. He comes back ranting about the nigger cunt bitch who can't speak English in the store was hard to understand, for her southern accent. Sometime around all this, he also threatened to kill me if I ever cheated on him, forbade me from touching another woman if we did decide to have a threesome. I'm bi and made this clear on the first date, told me gays didn't have rights and weren't real people while claiming to be atheist, and told a friend about the time he coerced a girl into cheating on her boyfriend just so she could get a ride to said boyfriend's house, and how smug he was when he shook the boyfriend's hand. I was also forbidden to have single male friends. Ever. Even if I was already friends with them. Oh, and told me I wasn't allowed to have my own opinion, because as the man only has counted in our relationship, and it was my duty to smile and nod. At the same time, he expected me to be independent and have a career. All the time blaming his inconsistencies on being a Gemini. The breakup was mutual by the time it happened, 10 months into the relationship with 8 months of him not being around, and I am now dating one of the single male friends he forbade me to speak to. I left home at 17 and moved to the city from our small town, with a guy whose mother has schizophrenia. We had been dating for a few months, and he seemed quite sweet. I got him a job working on a farm with my uncle, 20 minutes from the city center. We lived on the farm in a small, but quite run-down house. I found work quite quickly, and was studying full-time, so was pretty busy. He smoked a lot of weed during the day and also evening. As I started to meet people and make friends, he developed quite a strong paranoia. My uncle was a single guy who lived just 2 minutes up the road. He also lived with a couple of flatmates. I cleaned his house twice a week to earn some extra money. During this time I became good friends with the flatmates. My boyfriend became completely convinced that I was sleeping with these flatmates. One night he locked me in the bathroom. He wouldn't let me out until I admitted what I had done. He said that once I did he would kill me. I hadn't done anything wrong, but he wouldn't let me out until I admitted. I was locked in there for a day and night. While there he smashed our house to bits. He smashed holes in the walls and most of our plates. When he finally let me out we fought. He pushed me, I pushed him back. I lunged and got a big knife, stupid move now that I think about it. But I was young, sleep-deprived, and high on stress. I held the knife to my stomach and I said, I'm just going to kill myself, because either I do it or you do it. We are going to end up killing each other. Something has to stop here. He freaked. I walked out and up the road to my uncle's. I didn't tell him what had happened, but said I needed to move in for a while. I didn't have the money to be anywhere else and didn't want to admit defeat and end up back in my hometown. The ex broke into my uncle's house. I woke up to him standing over my bed. He punched me in the face and put his hands around my throat. I struggled. He tried to kiss me. I reminded him that my uncle was sleeping next door and that if he heard him he would wake up and kill him. So, he left. For weeks after, wherever I was he would follow me. Even when I went back to our hometown, I was in a bar and would notice him parked across the road. Full stalker creepy. Sweet and innocent BF turns into psycho stalker. Developing full paranoid schizophrenia, complete with full murderous rage. When I broke up with my high school boyfriend, I naively went through a period of thinking we could just be friends. We'd been together over 5 years, high school and a bit of college, before we broke up. It hadn't been a good relationship. During one of these we can be friends moments I'd been at his house hanging out and decided around 11 that it was time for me to go home. He completely lost it and became enraged at the fact that I wasn't going to spend the night. He threw a fricking remote control at me, which narrowly missed my face and smashed into the wall and broke. And so, I grabbed my bag and split it. He lived in a very suburban neighborhood, so I just started booking it, on foot towards a main road so I could call a taxi. All of a sudden, I noticed headlights coming up behind me. He is following me in his car, screaming obscenities at me, and threatening to run me over. He actually hops the curb in his Ford Focus, and I sort of dart behind a tree. So now, I'm panicked to the point of hysteria, and he suddenly gets extremely calm and opens the passenger side door and tells me he just wants to give me a lift to the train station. When I say, "Are you kidding me?" he pulls off of the curb, idles the car next to the tree that I am still cowering behind, and starts laying on his horn. Neighbors start coming out of their houses to see what the commotion is, and he urges them to look at this bad girl. After a few moments of him screaming this, he peels off. I pretty much ran the remaining blocks to the main road while calling a taxi. This was years ago. I haven't seen him since, but he's still good for an occasional text message either asking me to hang out or telling me to go. I was the crazy ex-boyfriend. A girl and I dated once, and I thought I was entitled to her love. I wrote her a note begging her to get back with me. She said no. So, I resorted to being annoying, asking her in passing, "Wanna go out with me?" That went on until she threatened to smack me. I still pinned after her and caught myself staring at her in classes we had together. Eventually, I was able to force myself to move on, and told her that I didn't like her anymore, and not to worry about me, in retrospect, which was pretty creepy, too. We're still not on speaking terms, which is a shame, because we could have been decent friends. I'm really ashamed of myself, and every time I think about it, I facepalm. When I was fresh out of high school, I dated a guy for a couple of months. He was more into it than I was, and I eventually broke it off. For a while, he would randomly come by my apartment in the middle of the night and bang on the door while I ignored him or call so many times that I had to unplug my phone, but I eventually went off to college and didn't hear any more from him. Fast forward 17 years. He sends me a friend request on FB, and I figure, why not? This was mistake 1. He immediately begins posting on my wall, "So, are you really married?" Yes. What do you think of me? I don't. Did you ever love me? Dude, I can't even remember last month. This was almost 2 decades ago. I defriend and proceed to ignore him. He has mutual friends who convey his begging messages to please be his friend. He begins posting on his wall that we're engaged, getting married this summer, that I'm having his child, etc., etc. I don't have a good ending. This is still going on. It's been 2 years. I dated a guy for 3 months. He was horribly lazy, incapable, and happy being sad. He felt bad because he didn't cut himself, so then he started. And then I broke up with him. 7 months later, with no communication between, I got a letter in the mail. The letter itself is pathetic, overdramatic, and tear-stained, but out falls a picture of his arm with my name carved into it. I dated a guy for 2 months who, for the next year, kept a journal specifically about me. I found this out when he came over one day before I moved and left it on my desk with a note telling me to read it and understand. The entire notebook was full, and every entry was blaming me for some aspect of his life: drinking, smoking, anxiety problems, and addressing me as an awful person for not loving him back. I have more, but I dated a pathological liar for 2 years. I found this out when his best friend informed me of his secret other relationship that had been going on for around 6 months. After this came a spewing forth of other lies, including stealing $2,000+ from his job before quitting and framing a coworker he didn't like, several facts about his home life, his drug habits, etc. Immediately broke up with him. A year and a half later, now, I still receive almost daily updates from him about his life and how I am his soulmate. I have never responded to any of these other than the occasional, "That's not how I feel about you, you need to meet new people." I dated a foreign boy for 4 months who proposed to me and demanded I move back with him to his home country so we could start a whole new life together. When I declined, he became truly angry / started crying uncontrollably. He liked to think of himself as my savior and benefactor, and he felt like my rejection of his proposal was a slap in the face for all he had done for me and was wholly unfair. He then immediately accused me of cheating on him and leading him on and making him love me when all along I had been saying this is a casual relationship, I'm not looking for anything too serious. I was seeing a guy for about 2 weeks, not even dating, never kissed, never did anything super romantic, who was hyper-Christian. After he gave me a lecture on how good, real women are meant to be passive and should not have any type of responsibility or leadership position, and how they should not go to college, he started writing me letters telling me how he wanted to change me and inspire godly / womanly virtue in me. I start ignoring him, and he invites me to meet up one last time for coffee. I meet up with him at a coffee shop and he proposes to me, claiming that he knows there's God in there, somewhere, and how he feels he can inspire me to be the woman I was meant to be. I hooked up with a guy, we had established before that it would be a one-time thing hookup, nothing else, who, mid-coitus, stopped and stared me dead in the eyes and said, "I just wanted you to know that I actually feel differently about you. I was hoping you would be my girlfriend. I can't continue meeting unless you say yes." I was on top, and he was holding my hips firmly in place so I couldn't get up off of him. He was 6 feet 5 inches, and I am 5 feet 4 inches. Cue awkward moment, I tell him I should probably go. He keeps holding me in place, and starts tearing up and saying how hurt he is. I push myself off, put clothes back on. There's still more, but you get the idea. This one's just a little weird. A couple of years ago, my orchestra stand partner, cello section, and he was a beautiful man, invites me to come and practice with him later that night. So, I met up with him and we practiced together. He's powerfully awkward, but he keeps subtly flirting, which at first seemed cute. He asks if he can kiss me. Excited, I say yes. Cue the slowest kiss move-in and the longest single kiss ever. When we pull our faces away, I notice that his cheeks are wet. Tears are streaming down his face. He's not sobbing or crying, these are just silent, steady tears. I ask him what's wrong, and he whispers, "Nothing, it was just beautiful." We carry on to the point where we have our clothes off, things are getting steamy. He's fingering me, "This is awesome, yeses," and then he whispers in my ear, I like your vaginal lubrication." I looked up, perturbed, and he was still crying. Silently. It went downhill from there. We never finished hooking up, nor did we try again, but we did become fairly good friends. He cried at me while initiating a hookup. Back when I used to be on AIM all the time, in high school, my friend's boyfriend would constantly come to me for relationship advice, claiming I knew her best. Then one day, unexpectedly, he tells me he had been having wet dreams with me as the subject. Also, we were cosplaying in the dream. I tell him not to talk to me about this, and that he should probably leave me alone now. This sets off a slew of stalking and explicit AIM messages. I block his username. He starts showing up random places to find me, like at school events over an hour's worth of driving away, at a friend's birthday, at my bus stop, he didn't go to my school, etc. I had already stopped talking to him for a while, and still to this day have no idea how he knew where to find me. I told my friend, and she dumped him. Now, I had already blocked his AIM, which was the only means of communication I had with him, but he still keeps showing up to our school events. Eventually, a teacher filed a complaint, and he was kicked out. There are maybe a handful more, but I'm tired. Smiley face. Also, I have really good relationship stories, too. I don't only date creepers. But I do seem to be a creeper magnet. I was living with my ex after he alienated my roommates. Red flag, I know. And one day, I came home from work to see that he had found old home movies with my high school BF in a secret folder on my computer and decided the best course of action was to smash my computer. I decided then that I'd had enough and told him I was leaving. He proceeded to block the door and wouldn't let me leave, then told me he was going to kill our dog. Deciding that I wouldn't give in to crazy, I eventually got him to let me leave and I went to my mom's house. He then told me that if I didn't come back, he'd throw out all my stuff. I'm kind of a clothes, so of course this hit me really hard, but I decided I wouldn't concede to his controlling psychopathy anymore and stood my ground. He then threw out all my stuff. When we broke the lease on the apartment, he had a party with all his friends and spray-painted walls and mirrors, ripped outdoor frames, kitchen cabinets, and punched dozens of holes in the walls. I then found out from the management company that the damage would be around $7,000. Because we were both broke 20-year-olds, I had convinced my dad to co-sign for me, so he ended up getting over for the bill, which was eventually negotiated down to about $3,000. I pressed charges, but the police officers never did anything, and I didn't sue in civil court because I was moving to NYC for law school anyway, and I just wanted to put this behind me. It's been almost 2 years, and the man still texts me to say he misses me. Even though he now has a GF of about a year. My ex threw out all my stuff and destroyed our apartment. Don't let crazy stick their dick in you, no matter how good it feels. I was studying in a different building on campus. My then boyfriend didn't want to accompany myself and my friends to this building to study, stating that it would be nice for me to spend some time with my friends without him. This building happened to be about 2 blocks from a local pizza place, so around 11 p.m., we decided to call it a night in studying and grab some pizza. I returned to my dorm around 12 a.m. and went to visit my boyfriend. He asked how my night was, and I proceeded to tell him the interesting bio homework I did and ended with the story about grabbing pizza. He then began to yell at me for not getting him a slice of pizza. I left because it was stupid. I screamed it over the fact that I didn't bring him back food when I went out with my friends. Over the next month, he would withhold random stuff from me because I didn't bring him pizza that night. During a rough alcoholic binge about 3 years ago, I started seeing this guy I met at a bar. After the first night after making out, he said, "I love you," and I ignored it, thinking he said it as an impulsive kind of thing. Fast forward to the next night I saw him, he turned on the computer, and told me that he watches videos of his home country, and cries at night. And then he put on a video and cried in front of me. Even in my tipsy state, I wanted to run. After 2 nights of seeing this guy, I ignored his calls. I told him through text to stop texting me, and when I finally mustered up the courage to go back to the bar I met him at, I was with friends, and this was after the binge was over. He came up to us and asked loudly if I was going to introduce him to his new friends as my boyfriend. I told him we were never boyfriend and girlfriend, and he cried openly, while telling me he loved me. I can never go back into that bar again with him there, because I might go to jail for all the glasses I want to break over his head. Made out with a guy twice. He confessed his love for me on the first night, and I think he meant it in his own little crazy way. The worst was a guy that had incredibly lofty standards for women. There's a reason he was single for almost all his life, because if you didn't look like the airbrushed models on a magazine, you're some sort of subhuman monster dyke that needed to be killed with fire. Heaven forbids my legs even dare have a bit of stubble, because oh God, I skipped my shower and didn't shave the night before. He would literally want me to drive back home, shave my legs, and then come back, or he wanted nothing to do with me. We'd go shopping, and he'd tried to get me to buy the trashiest looking clothing because he essentially wanted me to dress like that. If I broke out with some acne, he would complain about the eyesore. He was just so fussy about appearances. We dated for about 2 months, sheesh. Oh yes, he also read and believed in The Secret. Ex stole my car and disappeared for 4 days. Call me from the train for a ride. When I pick him up, he's clearly been sleeping outside and is desperate for food. Explanation: he went on a heroin binge in Brooklyn, got arrested with 20 individual bags, intent to sell, got high with a police officer, blamed it all on the girl he was with, and now has to do 6 months in jail. And my car? Abandoned in a parking lot, where he had kicked all the lights in. Found out boyfriend was a heroin addict/drug dealer. About 5 or so years ago, I was with some loser. He isolated me from my friends, told me I was fat, beat me, did drugs behind my back, threw lit cigarettes at me, among a dozen other things. When I finally got the courage to leave him, he told my new guy that I had AIDS and herpes. He then also told me I indeed have herpes, and it was from some girl he screwed behind my back. Ended up, I didn't have anything. He just wanted to hurt me. Over the years, he'd try and keep in contact with me via social networking sites, or jail letters under the guise of making amends. He is still the same loser, just older. He finally left me alone when my current boyfriend made him look like a fool for trying to introduce himself to him. I have nothing but contempt for someone who would in one breath say he loved me and in the next call me worthless. I started dating this guy I knew vaguely from high school when I was in my early 20s. It was one of my first relationships, which is why this lasted about 4 months and not 2 weeks. Several things became known as the months went on. In this order, he was very friendly and religious, raised by Southern Baptist parents. What they didn't know is it wasn't their religion. He was otherkin, as they call it now, and had melded together some crazy dragon religion, mixed with quasi-historical druidic lore. Yes. He believed the main dragon god lived in a Hawaii volcano. Yes, these dragons could take human form. No, he was not alone in this. He was very ashamed about past experiences. He suddenly fell into about 3 more experiences in the last month of our relationship, before I got the tits together to break it off. Most of them with other dragon god guys. I found him a year later at a Ren fair. We were checking out the same guys. I recently Googled him up for stuff and giggles, and he's gone completely insane and can't keep a job because he thinks he's being repressed. All hail the dragon? The throwaway account, because even 3 years later, I still worry about him finding me. Things were normal for a couple of years, with no indications of crazy. He was a bit aloof and moody at times, but I mistakenly attributed that to his past and home life. Then we moved into a nice apartment together. Right after moving in, they were converted into condominiums and sold to investors. We ended up with some horrible neighbors, rich parents who gave their 19 to 21-year-old children condominiums as a place to live. They partied all night and enjoyed revving the engines of their sports cars at 2 a.m. The police officers were called numerous times, but nothing was done. That's when my boyfriend snapped and decided to pull a gun on them and go shooting it in the air to scare them. The police officers did indeed come that time and he ended up in jail, naturally. When he got out, I was really angry and ready to move out, but he sweetly talked me into staying and we moved. He also managed to convince the judge to drop his felony charge to a misdemeanor, something that still bothers me to this day because I watched him totally bend the system to his will. Things were never quite right after that, and there was a sudden darkness that seemed to be exposed to the incident. He started verbally venting his frustrations out on me in the form of mental abuse. One day I came home from swimming, and he'd punctured my tires and told me that someone needed to teach me a lesson about respect. I went to change and noticed that the gun was not in the closet. Totally at that point and scared for my life, I grabbed my phone, wallet, and laptop and went out the window, leaving everything else behind. I hopped on a train, called a friend that I knew he did not know, and stayed with them for a couple of weeks while I put my life back together. That's when the insane emails and texts started. He begged me to come back, then accused me of cheating on him, because why else would I leave, threatened to burn all of my things, threatened to come to my work and shoot up the place, bragged about how he could hunt me like an animal, etc. I took out a restraining order, convinced work to let me radically change my schedule, and after about 6 months I got a job offer and moved across the country. He emailed me up until about a year ago, begging me to come back, offering incentives like cash and gifts. I have mail filtering set, so his messages automatically go into a folder marked crazy. My bad for forgiving so much, but I did learn a lot from that failed first relationship. Boyfriend got trigger happy with the neighbors, then tried to turn his crazy ray on me. I was with this guy for a year and a half, and he was a bit of a psycho. Dumped me a few days before my 18th birthday, so I made plans to see my best friend and other friends in the evening. The day before my birthday he comes crawling back and begs to see me, so I say he can come to the pub in the evening with the rest of my friends. He kicks off, eventually I give in and let him come round a tiny bit earlier with my friend there too. Awkward, they don't like each other. We go to the pub later on in the evening and he gets pretty jealous about all the attention/free drinks I'm getting. Obviously, I don't pay much attention to him. He storms off and I don't realize till a while later, which I go after him, he shouts and screams in my face. I got sent home in a taxi, very drunk and upset. He comes round later on and convinces me to talk to him, which ends up in arguing and him headbutting the road, splitting his head open pretty badly, and then going into the house and grabbing a large knife, crying, and shouting something about not worth living anymore. He tries to drag it across his throat, and I get it off of him, cutting my hand in the process. Then his mom comes downstairs and thinks this is all my fault somehow. My ex screamed at me, tried to slit his own throat, and cut my hand with a knife on my 18th birthday. In high school, I dated this guy for about 6 months. During that time he was normal, and I was absolutely infatuated with him. At the end of month 6 we ended up meeting, and when it was over he held me and kissed my forehead and then told me that he wanted to cut my skin off into the shapes of stars and put them in the sky so he could always see a part of me. He said this as he cried, and the bear hugged me. I didn't know what to say other than, thanks, and when I went home that night I called him and ended things. The next 4 months he would wait for me outside of my classes and get his friends to come talk to me. Then he just got posted flyers around school with the bad phrases. I came home crying and my dad was absolutely livid, like the type where he didn't say anything besides "I'll take care of it." My dad was in the military police at the time, and he was actually my ex's dad's boss. He had me tell him where my ex and his friends hung out after school, and he and his partner drove their patrol car over to this park that they were at. One of the boys ran, and my dad's partner caught up with him and dragged him back to the car. My dad then proceeded to make all 4 of the boys cry. My dad still won't tell me what he said to them. Later, I got a call from each kid apologizing. My ex avoided me the rest of high school like the plague. Oh, Christ. My family joked that I was dating my way through the DSM-4 once. My boyfriends have all strangely had a history of varying mental issues, but none of them were serious. I could draft novels about this one guy, though. I'm sorry if it's long. First, I met him playing D&D when I was 16. He happened to be the DM and was about 3 years older than me. Of course, we were each other's firsts for a lot of things, so there was that emotional attachment. I got along with his family well enough, even though they were religious, and I definitely was not, and his mom didn't really like me because I was corrupting her son. We dated for just under 3 years. After the first year of dating, I was basically done with him, but again, he had been my first and he wasn't a terrible boyfriend, but D&D was a large part of his life and it's all he would ever talk about. He also had temper issues and would become extremely angry at the smallest thing, and it eventually was so bad I was actually afraid of him. We sort of talked about marriage, then I went off to college. On the weekends I would come back from college and stay with him and his family. On Saturday nights we'd play D&D and on Sunday morning I'd go to church and then Sunday night he'd take me home. Rinse and repeat for the first year of college. By the end of that year I was definitely done with him, because I was in college, and he was not really doing much with his life and his temper was still there. I didn't want to break up with him because I knew it would go badly. I stupidly pulled the whole "let's go on a break" line. He actually believed it and was devastated when he found out I was interested in another guy on campus. He didn't actually seem crazy until I met up with him over Thanksgiving break 3 months later to return his Xbox and get my own stuff back. He was nearly in tears the whole time and told me that I'd ruined his life and how horrible everything was. I really did feel bad about it and apologized over and over again. He wouldn't let it go, though. The ring had been ordered. He told me. I was really upset when I went home and didn't talk to him. He kept trying to contact me through friends, but I didn't have any of it. I transferred to a private college out of state for the following spring semester. My birthday was in April, and I got a text message from him on my new cell phone number wishing me a happy birthday. I didn't really think much of it, thinking that he had just accidentally been given my new number by a well-meaning friend. I didn't respond once I figured out who it was that was texting me. I came home for the summer and stayed with my mom and got a new boyfriend. One day I was with some old friends, and one of them asked me if I had talked to my ex lately. I told her no, I hadn't spoken to him since our hostage exchange about 6 months prior, and she was perplexed because she had heard from him that he had been driving up to my college town quite often. She just assumed we were either friends or just friends again. I was horrified. It's a 45-minute drive without traffic, so it was kind of a stretch that he'd been going there for some other reason. About a month after I found that out, it got even weirder. One morning, I woke up pretty early and had a text message from him on my phone saying that he just really needed to see me and could I please talk to him. It was sent sometime around 3 in the morning. I went upstairs and my aunt asked, "Was your new boyfriend over last night?" I denied it, because my new boyfriend lived about an hour away and I wouldn't have snuck him into my mom's house. I asked her why she had asked, and she said, "Oh, because I saw his car parked outside the house about 6 a.m. this morning." I didn't think anything of it, but the car was gone at 6:30 or 7. I immediately got chills and texted my ex back, asking him if by chance he had that make and model of car. He responded that he had traded in his old car for a new one that looked exactly like my new boyfriend's car. I stupidly agreed to meet with him after that and realized it was a bad idea. We went out to dinner, and I made sure everyone knew where I was going and had my cell phone on me. He wasn't acting weird at first, and I was kind of surprised. He started trying to guilt trip me again, at one point leaping up from the table and almost running to the bathroom when I answered his question about my new boyfriend, and how it would have been none of his business if we met. When he got back, he apologized and said he couldn't stomach the thought of me with another guy. I asked him to take me home after we were done eating, but we drove around instead. I was terrified. He kept trying to be helpful and cheerful, but I was just done. I had him take me home, and when we got to my front door, he asked for a hug and a kiss. I hugged him and he started trying the guilty thing again, and I just lost it. I told him off for being a creep and sitting outside the house at 3 a.m. and trying to make me feel bad, and I was done feeling bad. I told him to go away and leave me alone. I didn't hear from him after that. He badmouthed me to all our friends, and then dated a girl about 5 or 6 years younger than him, who had just turned 18. They got engaged after 6 months of dating, married 3 months after that, and then they had a kid last August. Crazy. I had a boyfriend in the 7th grade, young love, who, after we broke up, submitted my name and phone number to an online phone hotline for lonely housewives. This was a long time ago. Weird old men started calling asking for me, and my hilarious English as a second language Italian mother would yell and scream about how they were trying to talk to a 12-year-old girl. I bet a bunch of guys shat their pants during the month my name was out there. Somehow, this was all traced back to the ex-boyfriend, and he had to write me a letter of apology. If this would have happened now, though, I bet he could have been charged as some sort of criminal.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.